It's good to have everybody here for our very first ever Passover Zoom call. And as you saw in the email, there are more coming on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Did I say that? Oh, today's Tuesday. Look at that. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Feels like a Monday. And like I said, I'll do a little bit of teaching, and then we'll open it up for questions. So what I'd like to base my remarks on, I hope all of you have seen the Passover guide that we sent out this year with some ideas and suggestions for the Seder. I'm going to assume that you got that in the mail. You had a chance to look at that. If you didn't, we have more in the synagogue for you too. But I want to go back to something that I did last year in our Passover guide there, which still has a lot of great resources to look at. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen with you. You should all be seeing what I'm seeing, right? Everyone see the Maggid telling the story of the Exodus on your screen now for those watching?
No, how do you get on the screen? I'm working off a telephone.
Ah, okay. So then I'll describe it for you. Don't worry. If you're on the telephone, you might not see it, but I'm going to tell you where you can see it, and don't worry, I'll be explaining it. But if you're on the video, you should be able to see the screen that I put up there. So what I'm working off of is last year's Seder supplement, which is available on our website, pbsonline.org/Passover. It's right at the top, and we encourage you to bring that to your Seder along with this year's Passover guide to help try to think about some of the themes and conversations that you'll have there. So the section I looked at last year was Maggid, which of course is the telling of the story, the main part of the Passover Seder, the part that really begins with the 4 questions and the answer of Avadim Hayinu Lefaro b'Mitzrayim, we were slaves in Egypt to Pharaoh, and it goes all the way through the section that I want to focus on, which is Rabbi Gamliel's statement about the 3 things we have to talk about on Passover: Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. This is the part that the sages say is Harei Zeh Meshubach. The more you say, the better it is. So you can keep reminding your Seder guests about that as you go through the story. But what's interesting about this last section of Maggid from Rabbi Gamliel is how he focuses in on these 3 things, which already have been mentioned in the Seder, of course, but also he adds a twist to them that's a bit different. So I'm going to read what we have in the Seder, right, where it says Rabbi Gamliel Haya Omer, it says in the Haggadah, Rabbi Gamliel would say, Kol shelo amar shlosha divarim elu b'Pesach lo yatsa yedei chovato. Anyone who does not explain the significance of these 3 things during Passover, during the Seder, did not fulfill their duty, and they are Pesach, Matzah, Umaror, right? The Passover sacrifice, Matzah, and Maror. So there are a couple questions that we can ask about this. The first question that I think we can ask is, why these 3, right? Why these 3 out of all the different things we have over Passover are what Rabbi Gamliel mentions? And second of all, why does he say that we have to explain them, right? This is something that, very rarely do we have mitzvot where we're told that we need to explain something as opposed to doing something. But here Rabbi Gamliel makes the effort to say that they need to be explained. And I think with that question, we'll start with the second question first. It really gets to the heart of what the Seder is about, right? We know it's not just a recitation of what's in the Haggadah and reading the words, but trying to get to that deeper meaning of what we're saying and encourage conversation for everybody around the Seder table. And at the bottom of the sheet, I have a couple questions and ideas that might help you do that. So, for example, Rabbi Gamliel says that these are the 3 things, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, that are so important for the Seder itself. One of those questions for discussion I like to ask at my Seder is, what would be the 3 essential things for Jewish life today? And it's a question where you can think about community, you can think about Israel, you can think about mitzvot, you can think about Shabbat, you can think about family. There's all sorts of ideas and conversations that can come out of that can speak to what are the essential pieces about Judaism today, just like Rabbi Gamliel feels that these 3 things, Pesach, Matzah, Maror, are the 3 essential things for the Passover Seder today. But that brings us to why these 3 things, right? And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who I quote in my article here, picks up on the symbolism of these 3 pieces.
This one.
First, he points out that one of the reasons why we have these 3 things is because this is what the Torah tells us about. And actually, this Shabbat is Shabbat HaChodesh, And we're going to read how the Torah is going to mention how we should eat the Pesach, the lamb that we don't do anymore, of course, but was such a central part of the Seder once upon a time. And also, we eat it with matzah u'maror. So the Torah brings these three things together, these three foods together, as important pieces of the Seder. But as Rabbi Sachs writes, he says they symbolize something deeper. And this comes out in the Haggadah too, when you read through those words there, where Pesach, the Passover lamb really symbolizes freedom, right? It's something that symbolizes how God passed over the house of the Egyptians, and it's something that had to be eaten together, and it symbolizes our freedom, which of course we celebrate on the holiday of our freedom. Whereas the maror, the bitter herbs, represents our slavery. And that's kind of the tension and really the story that we have over the course of Passover, which is going from slavery from freedom, from matzah to Pesach, so to speak. But we know we don't have Pesach anymore. We don't have that Paschal lamb anymore. And I think that's where the matzah comes in, which in essence combines both. On the one hand, matzah is something that reminds us that we had to leave quickly from Egypt, and it reminds us we were slaves. It's lechem oni, this poor person's bread that we eat. But on the other hand, it's also something that symbolizes our freedom because it's the food of our freedom. And I think that's what makes these three things so essential, and that we explain them as so essential, because they really help us pick up on the key themes of the holiday, and allows us to talk about what does it mean to celebrate that freedom. You know, the exodus from Egypt was not just freedom from being slaves, but freedom to worship God. What does that mean for us today? Also with the maror and talking about slavery. Thank God we're not slaves in Egypt anymore. But certainly there is bitterness and slavery that exists in the world. What are those things that we can identify and talk about how we address? And when we eat that matzah, to think about how it combines both of those things, and the way in which we try to be like matzah and being the bridge between helping our world move from slavery, from oppression, to freedom, which of course we celebrate on Passover, Hag Kasher, this holiday of freedom. So I hope this helps you think a little bit about your Seder. I'm going to pause right here and open it up for some questions and discussion.